So, well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. I think actually you chose right when you had us in mind to go and to cover this subject. I've been living in the U.S. for almost 22 years. And prior to that, I lived almost for 3 years in London. So I'm very familiar with the Spiritist movement in English-speaking countries such as the UK and the US, of course, for 22 years. And I'm very familiar with that because I've been participating in this movement since I moved to England, and then I came here as well. I've been working with the United States Spiritist Federation for about 15 years, and I have been part of the International Spiritist Council for, I don't know, another 15 years or so. So I'm very familiar with the subject. As I was explaining before to Katya, the way I see the lessons, the study we have today of lessons 10 and 12, it should be more like a conversation. So feel free to ask questions as we go with that. It's much more of an informative topic than actually, something more like a talk. So, I'm sure some of you will be more interested in subject than others, but I think it's always very important for us to understand a little bit about the history of Spiritism in our country and what are we doing and what are the objectives that we have when we talk about Spiritism in the US especially. Once I was saying actually to some groups in California, the way I envisioned Spiritism. Spiritism to me is like, when you think about a very beautiful, big, strong tree, like an oak tree perhaps, and it covers everything. It is so powerful. But the thing is that we sometimes overlook is that even this big tree, it started with a seed. And as the seed started growing and all the roots were taking place on the ground, one thing that we do not realize that many of us, when we are talking about disseminating Spiritism, whatever we are, but let's say more in particular in this country, we are like those roots. Sometimes we are not aware of other roots that are around. We cannot see that because they are on the ground.
Jussara, yeah. Okay. I just changed something here so you can use the full screen now on your computer and then we can still see you. Okay?
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So, like I was saying, is like sometimes we may feel that our Spiritist center, because it's farther away from another one and from others from the country, we feel that very much that we can be isolated. But this is not true, because actually we are part of the same tree that we call the Spiritist, and we are feeding and we are working and we are an important part for the health of this tree. So if we think it like that, even if we are a small Spiritist group, even if we are very far away from others, we have to understand that regardless of that, we are all together, we are all trying to do the same thing here. Okay, so let us start talking a little bit about this Spiritist movement. Okay, let's see. Some of the objectives. To understand the difference between Spiritism and the Spiritist movement, to define a Spiritist movement, to point out the goals of the Spiritist movement. Actually, the whole, when I was reading these lessons 10 and 11 of the roadmap, they come from a brochure, a textbook that is called the Guidelines for Workers and Practical Guidelines for Workers, that actually was prepared by the Brazilian Federation, the greatest part of it. And actually I was the one that had translated this material many, many years ago, okay? So it was not something that was new to me. So to describe the process of the Spiritist dissemination, indicating its means. So we start with a question. Do we need Spiritist centers, meetings, workshops, passes, meetings, and why? Well, for everything that we want to learn, for every lesson, for every new subject, we need places where we can go that is going to be enlightening us or teaching us as to the subject of our interest. So when we are talking about Spiritism, especially the way that Kardec presented to us, always saying that it was very important for us to focus on studying, on learning, on having the theory, on researching, very much like he did himself. Of course, we are going to say that all the places, Spiritist center organizations that we may have, is crucial for us. This is where we go to learn, to dissipate our doubts, to be able to ask questions that we all have. And so every form of meeting, workshops that we are going to have is going to be very important for us. And the passes in this case is one of the practices that we have in Spiritism. As we all know, many people actually come to Spiritism because they are facing some challenges in their lives, for family reasons, professional reasons, because they are experiencing phenomena. And one of the things that we can provide to them, as we know, are passes. And passes will help us in this process. So, and we will conclude reading this message by Dr. Bezerra de Menezes. So, what is the Spiritist movement? Is the cluster of activities whose objective is the study, dissemination, and practice of Spiritism as contained in the basic works of Allan Kardec, placing it within the reach and at the service of all humanity. One thing that is very important for us to point out here is that Spiritism is contained as a whole in the Spirit book. All the other books, and it's more than 30 that Kardec wrote or published, it comes to being a broader explanation of what we have in the Spirit book. So if you want to get to know Spiritism, you have to know the Spirit book and the studies. This is the reason why Divaldo tells us that the Spirit Viana de Carvalho came to him several times asking him to study and study and study and study over and over again the Spirit book, which is something that according to him, he does up to this day at least 15 minutes every day. The activities that compose the Spiritist movement are carried out by individuals, jointly or on their own, and by Spiritist institutions. The Spiritist institutions constitutes of the spirited groups, centers, societies that are going to develop general activities related to the study, dissemination, and practice of Spiritist doctrine. We normally do not like to use the word doctrine. We try to use most of the time of Spiritism. They may be small, medium, or large in size. We have federations that are going to develop activities aimed at the union of Spiritist institution and unification of the Spiritist movement. and specialized entities, such as, for instance, we have here the Spiritist Medical Association. They are going to develop specific Spiritist activities, such as those devoted to social assistance, doctrinal dissemination, or specific, in the case that I mentioned, the medical studies. Study groups of Spiritism basically concentrating on the initial study of the Spiritist doctrine. So when we are talking about Spiritist movement, we are talking about a whole of things. We are talking about institutions. We are talking about the core of Spiritism per se. Okay, this is what, and the organizations that we have, they are going to make sure that we will be able to work with the core of knowledge, the set of knowledge that Kardec gave to us, so that we can spread this knowledge. It's important for us, before we go to that, to make a difference between a Spiritist movement and a Spiritism. Spiritism is the knowledge, is the set of knowledge that we have, like I said, contained completely in the Spirit's book, with ramifications and broader explained in the other books of the codification and others that Kardec presented to us. This is the Spiritism. When we are talking about Spiritist movement, we are talking about organizations. So it's important for us to differentiate that, because many times, as you can imagine, I can imagine that, because this is almost so far a rule, you may have faced difficulties in implementing the works of your Spiritist center. Maybe, it was easier to work with this or that person, but not that easy to work with this and that other person. Maybe it's easy to deal with the studies, but not so easy to deal with all the administration that it requires. So when we are talking about that, we are talking about Spiritist movement, and we can find many faults and many difficulties and many things that may lead us to question belonging or not to a Spiritist organization. But then again, we are talking about organization and people that has nothing to do at all with Spiritism. Very much like in any other, philosophy or religion, you may find it very pure in its core concepts, but then again, you will find those that represent that religion or philosophy in particular, and have lots of things that you may say that will prove them not to be worthy of even belonging to that kind of religion or philosophy. So is this clear?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Because, we will find, unfortunately, because we are human beings, problems when we are talking about Spiritist institution or Spiritist movement. And this should never, ever be in the way of ourselves and Spiritism. We have always to separate that. In the Spirit's book, we have a question by Kardec, very important about Spiritism on program. So he asks, will Spiritism become a widespread belief, or will it continue to only be accepted by the minority? And the answer from spirits, it will definitely become a widespread belief, and will mark a new era in the history of humankind, because it belongs to nature, and the time has come for it to be recognized and accepted by human knowledge. It will have to withstand first criticism, prompted by selfish interests rather than by conviction, because there are individuals whose interests lie in tearing down this belief. Some out of pride, others for material motives. Its opponents, however, will be forced to join the general consensus, or otherwise risk undermining their own efforts. When we read that and thinking that Spiritism has already 160 years, we may think, was Kardec wrong? Were the spirits wrong in this answer that they gave? And the answer is no, of course not. They know what they are talking about. The thing is, when we think about a material perspective, we want things to happen in our lifetime, or even in a short period than that, in 10 years, 20 years. If we think about Christianity, for example, it took over 300 years for Christianity to be accepted by the Roman Empire, and after that it became widespread. So even having Jesus personally coming here and presenting all the teachings and continue with the representation with those highly, involved spirits, workers such as the apostles and others that came after. It took 300 years. How can we imagine that only after 160 years we are going to be seeing the difference? This week in particular, something very, actually even today, one of them today, something very interesting happened. One was that a friend of ours, she's part of the Tri-State Spiritist Federation. Her son is 14 and he studies in a public school in Connecticut. So in his book of geography, they have a chapter that talks about religions. And believe it or not, in this book here in a public school in the US, Connecticut, they listed Spiritism as being a religion. And they described Spiritism, talking exactly about the Spiritism we are talking here about, as being a movement that has developed in France and is very highly accepted in Brazil, and it has 14 million followers. And tonight, this is the day that we also have work in our Spiritist Center. I just came back about an hour ago. We had our fraternal assistants, and for the first time, an American woman that talked to me during the week. She came for the fraternal counseling, and she's experiencing some phenomena and all of that has been happening for quite many years in her life. And so when I asked her how did she hear about us, or did she hear about Spiritism, she replied to me that a nun from New Jersey told her to look for us. Yes, isn't that amazing? I said, really? And most interesting is that this nun, she went to talk to this nun in this, I asked for more information because I said, I need more information about this nun, So she told me that the nun has, some mediumship herself, but it's still, because this woman is facing, this phenomena that may be classified as mediumship, that she would be better off looking for spiritism, and then she looking for the places for her to go and send her to us here in New York, in Manhattan. I thought I said, oh my God, that's so incredible. Okay, so things are happening, and it's very good to know. I think for us, especially that are trying to spread Spiritism in English, which is something really incredible. It was great. It was amazing to hear that. So, in the Medium's book, Kardec says that the groups corresponding together, visiting each other and transmitting to one another the results arrived at by each, may even now form the nucleus of the great Spiritist family, which will one day rally to itself all opinions and unite all men in the common brotherhood of Christian charity. So even though we are still very few in the world, not only in the US, and sometimes I think I always say to people that is, especially for us that are trying now, we are going to succeed. We are working on spreading Spiritism in this country and in the English language. We and people come to us and say, oh, how many Americans go to your group, and why are you doing that in English? And normally I say, and this is a very important piece of information. Did you know that in the first 15 years of Spiritism in Brazil, Spiritism was only practiced in French? Yes, the first 15 years. And did you know that we only had the 5 books of the Committification in English in this country 14 years ago? So, I mean, we still are entitled another year, okay? Another important piece of information is that according to the census that was conducted a few years ago in Brazil, we are declared 4 million people in Brazil that follows Spiritism, with close to 20 million that are sympathizers. So we are less than 5% of people, of Brazilians that follow Spiritism. After 134 years of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation. So let's, be patient, understand that Rome was not built in a day, okay? And so just keep up doing the good work that we are doing. The best thing for us to do is actually to work together. If we separate, we will not have the same strength. We will not have the same possibilities. If everyone is going to be working in, let's say, writing the same book or translating the same material or doing the same, we're only going to have the same things. But if we start corresponding and talking to each other, we are going to find out, for instance, that there are people in your group that are great at, let's say, design websites. And we need people in other organizations, in other Spiritist groups that are capable of doing great brochures, and others that are great in developing children and adolescents material. So if we do like that, and we try to find, the strength in each and every one of our groups, and if we work together, we will accomplish much more in so little less time. So Spiritist groups are places of study where we are going to practice fraternity, prayer, other activities that are related to Spiritist principles. Are schools of spiritual and moral education operating according to Spiritism, and offering fraternal assistance for everyone that needs guidance, enlightenment, help, or consolation. the basics of Spiritism, because we have to remember that Kardec mentions very strongly the need for a reason, for us to use our intelligence to analyze everything that we have and that we receive when we are talking about Spiritism. Which is very interesting when we think about that Kardec wrote that phrase, that famous phrase about reason and faith in the Gospel according to Spiritism. So there is a reason why Kardec placed that phrase when he was writing about the religious aspect of Spiritism. It was exactly because of that, because he knew that by touching the religious aspect, by talking about Jesus, by talking about Jesus' teachings, people would tend to bring back in this area the dogmatic concept they had. And then he said, listen, this is the book that is going to teach us the moral behavior, what we most need in order to evolve. But it has to be completely rid of any kind of dogma, and it has to be studied with our reason. Okay, so also Spiritist groups are places where we can take the children, youth, adults, elderly, because we have an opportunity to socialize, meeting people that think like we do, study, have activities together, and united under the banner of Spiritism. Do you have any questions or any comment that you would like to ask at this point?
Any questions?
I cannot see you. Are you all awake? I hope so, because, when I'm face to face with the audience and I see someone that is kind of, going away, sometimes I put one tone or two up, and then I wake up this person, but now I cannot see you, so I have to trust you, okay? And I understand that this subject is, it may be not one of the most interesting subjects for us to talk about, but like I said, it is important for us and for all of us that are engaged in the Spiritist groups that are intending to become practitioners and more than that. So it's also, yes. Mm-hmm.
Just a moment. I just, because we don't have a camera on our computer here, but I just start a video, the camera in a cell phone. I will try to put it here. I don't know if it is going to work. Maybe you can see.
Oh, that's wonderful. You're alive.
Yeah. So I will try to leave it here so you can see.
You're not the only spirit.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking to myself. Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Well, you actually cannot see like everyone, but yeah.
No, but
better
but
now.
At least, yeah, no, it is. Okay, I like that. It makes it more interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead then. So also, Spiritist centers are places that are going to always to be very simple. We do not need, a special decoration that is going to make it more holy or something like that, which is kind of challenging sometimes. Because exactly by the fact that we try to keep it very simple and not having, there's nothing wrong if you wanted to put the face of Jesus there or Bezerra de Menezes, but normally we try to keep it to a minimum. So what happens is, because we have this a very simple interior, sometimes people do not think that they are in a temple of God. and they can be very disrespectful in their way of dressing, in their way of speaking, in their way of laughing out loud. So we have to pay attention to that, and it's up to us, especially the ones that are more in the direction, the practitioners, to give the example and to try to remind people that it's not because we don't have the appearance of a church or any other kind of temple that we are not a temple ourselves. So, and the Spiritist group centers and societies, of course, are the ones that represent the fundamental unities of the Spiritist movement. So the Spiritist movement should be found in the Spiritist group centers or societies. Always promoting study, dissemination, and practice of Spiritism, while tending to individuals who seek enlightenment, guidance, and help for their spiritual, moral, and material problems. And wish to get acquainted with and study the Spiritism. So, here, for those who have been in the Spiritist Center for a while, you will realize that, we can help in the sense that we are going to have more understanding, that we are going to understand that if we are going through good times or bad times, it has a reason for that. And the reason will always be with a name of helping us in our personal evolvement. So if people are looking for us because they are facing like this spiritual, moral, or material problems, it's not up to us to solve those problems, because truth be said, we can barely solve our own problems. But with Spiritism, at least, we learn to cope with them. We learn that they are not going to last forever. We learn that there is a reason behind all that. And we will gather with the understanding with this that can only come from study, that how to cope with that and how to take advantage of all the situation we are going through. For those who wish to work, collaborate, and serve as well, Spiritist groups are a wonderful place for us to do that, to have this opportunity. So this is the message that ends this first lesson. That it is actually, we presented this message in the celebration that we had 2 weeks ago, actually 10 days ago, celebrating the 20th anniversary of the United States Spiritist Federation. So Dr. Bezerra de Menezes says the following: the world has plenty of gold in the soil, in the sea, in the coffers, but gold does not solve the problem of poverty. The world has plenty of space in the continents, in the cities, in the fields, but space does not solve the problem of greed. The world has plenty of culture in education, in know-how, in opinions, but the culture of intelligence does not solve the problem of selfishness. The world has plenty of theories in the sciences, in philosophical schools, in religions, but theories do not solve the problem of despair. The world has plenty of organizations in the area of administration, economy, and welfare, but these organizations do not solve the problem of crime. To extinguish the sword of ignorance which fosters poverty, to dissipate the shadow of greed which creates illusions, to exterminate the monster of selfishness which promotes war, to neutralize the germ of despair which promotes insanity, and to remove the torrent of crime which drags along misery. The only efficient therapy is the gospel of Jesus inside the human heart. And I'm going to tell you something interesting about that message from Dr. Bezerra de Menezes. This message was presented and read at the United Nations. In the year 2000, the United Nations here in New York City have promoted an encounter that they called Summit for Peace. So they called the main representatives of their religion or philosophy in the world. And Spiritism was invited. Evaldo Pereira Franco was here. He gave a talk at the United Nations to very big representatives of the world. And also at that moment, we had present here the president and the vice president of the Brazilian Federation, which was at the time Nestor Mazzotti. And Nestor Mazzotti, when he was, and I was present in this occasion, and Nestor Mazzotti, when he was invited to give the core of Spiritism and to actually give a message that would represent our let's say our philosophy, he came and presented these problems of the world. And it was very appropriated because we were there at the Summit for Peace, trying to see with all the religions and philosophies what was important for us to have and to do what to do in the world. And then Dr. Bezerra, in this message from Dr. Bezerra, he shows that, how aware we are of all the problems we have and how difficult sometimes, even when, like, for instance, in the first verse where he says, we have plenty of gold, but we still have poverty. So what is that we are lacking? So he comes at this last phrase and says that what we are lacking is the gospel of Jesus inside the human heart. And it was very powerful, very, very important, and it's now present in the registers of the United Nations, this message from Dr. Bezerra de Menezes. So he says, let us therefore, to continue finalizing the message, be courageous, expanding Spiritism, which rescues the gospel from the letter into the making of the new humanity, radiating the divine master's inspiration and influence through our emotions and ideas, through our rules of conduct and behavior, through our words and example, and borrowing from Allan Kardec's unforgettable concept on charity, let us proclaim to the problems of the world, without Christ, there is no solution. Okay. So this is the end of the first part. Do you have any questions or comments that you would like to?
Any questions? I can take the cell phone. No? Okay. No questions for now.
Yay, I'm such a good teacher, right? Or you are always sleeping and not paying attention. So, okay, let's go on with lesson number 12, the unification of the Spiritist movement. Well, so far we can only theorize about that, but one day I really hope we are going to see ourselves unified, because until then, we cannot even perhaps call ourselves a Spiritist, because we have not understood yet, or we have not understood that this is what we have to do, is what the first step is. Because we talk about, ridding ourselves from selfishness. And this is it. This is, is part of the process of not thinking only about, our center, our work here, but to think as a whole and how we can contribute as a whole. And in doing so, we have to put our personal interests apart and to work our whole. So let's see the objectives. To comprehend the importance of the unification of the Spiritist movement. And for that, we have to understand about the organizations. Well, first of all, let's start with the name. Now, we have here United States Spiritist Council, and you have United States Spiritist Federation. At the beginning of this year, because people in general all over the world are more familiarized with the word federation than council. And council actually, if you go to the definition, refers more to a group of people. And in the case of the federation, refer more to a group of organization, which is actually the function of United States Spiritist Federation. We have assumed a DBA, that doing business as, and we have registered also the name United States Spiritist Federation. So for all legal purposes, we can use both of them, but the first one is the United States Spiritist Council. But now, for other things, for everything else we are doing, we use the name of Spiritist Federation. So from this year forward, we have been starting to call ourselves Federation. So what is it? When was it found? What is the objective? Who forms and belongs to it? And how is it structured? So it was founded on November 15, 1997. So like I said, we have just celebrated 20 years of its foundation, created to promote the union of the U.S. Spiritist organizations and the unification of the Spiritist movement in the U.S. What does the word unification mean? What do you think it means? I would like some of you to answer that.
Unifying.
Can you hear?
Yes.
People is saying unifying, putting together.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't, what it doesn't mean, and sometimes people think about that and they can be a little resilient, let's say, they may not feel prone to join, is that we are going to be meddling in what they are doing, or trying to dictate what you are going to be doing in your Spiritist center. So unification means us being together. It doesn't mean that by being together, we are all equals or are going to be doing things exactly the same. Okay? And this is very important because, like I said, there are some groups that are resistant to join because they say, oh, no, I don't want you to start coming here and saying what I can and what I can't do. We never done that, and we will never do that. This is not the role of United States Spiritist Federation or any other federation. The role is to put everyone together, and like I said at the beginning, maybe, when we sit all together, one of you will say, you know what, we are so good here at the Spiritist Center to deal with this stuff of, online classes and this or that, and the other group will say, oh, I have no clue how to do that, so can you help me? So we will find ways of communicating and become stronger in this sense. So we count on each other's help and support to disseminate Spiritism. Because the less we waste our time with things, like I said, or reinventing the wheel, or doing the same thing in different corners of the country that we are in, the more productive we are going to be, okay? So the idea, we always try to do the best effort that we can to bring the Spiritist community in the U.S., always with a name of disseminating Spiritism. So what we pledge to promote fraternal union and the unification of the Spiritist movement, to promote the study, diffusion, and practice of the Spiritism according to its principle and postulates, and in all its fundamental scientific, philosophical, religious, ethical, and moral aspects. Promote the practice of spiritual and material charity in the light of Spiritism. Represent the Spiritist movement in the United States. And the structure of the United States Spiritists comprises of the board of directors, an auditing council, and the auditing council alternates, and an administrative council. So the United States Spiritist Federation today, I mean, since it begins, it has a board of directors. There are 7 people. And they have different functions. Of course, we have the president, the vice president, the treasurer, the secretary. But when we are talking about the administrative council, is where the functions that we do and we develop. So we have people that are going to be working with outreach programs, others that are going to be working more in the marketing aspect. Myself, for instance, I focus more on the doctrinal aspect in terms of, producing material, writing books, translating books, selecting speakers that we would like to have here in the several places that we have our representation in the U.S. And we have Tanya, that some of you know as well, is the one that is responsible for this huge event that we promote every year, trying to unify, to bring together people from all over the country. That is the symposium. Next symposium we are going to have is going to be in Washington, D.C., April 21st. So plan to go there. It's a wonderful opportunity and very important for all of us, because it's an opportunity that we have of meeting. The following day, normally we have our annual general meeting where people can go and participate and see what we are doing, and working and helping all of us in this building of Spiritism that we are so much. We know that how much important it is to us and to others as well. Any questions about the United States Spiritist Federation?
No.
Okay. So another thing is important. I mean, if you have an idea or a suggestion on how to, to better the work, or anything that it is within our reach to do, please come to us and also help and join us in the effort. Sometimes just as people come and say, oh, I would like to see this or that book translated. The thing with books is that unfortunately it's not up to us necessarily, what books we are able to translate or not. It's more up to the copyright owners. There are copyright owners of Spiritist books. They are not so friendly, so to say, in allowing us to translate books into other languages. And another important aspect of the Federation is actually for us to to disseminate Spiritism, especially in English. We know that the majority of us that are here are Brazilians. We understand that when we are talking about Spiritism in this country, we are talking about Spiritism in 3 different languages, because we have Spiritism being practiced in Spanish, in Portuguese, and in English. One thing that is important for us to pay attention is that Spiritism was brought to this country in the early 30s, maybe even the 20s. But we know of the first group in the early 30s, in 1930s. And of course, they were people that came from Mexico, from Colombia, from Cuba, later on, and it was what we had here. Only in the late 70s was when the Brazilians start arriving, some even in your area, California, others coming more to the East Coast. And in the 80s is when the Brazilians came, 80s and 90s, where we had a big affluence of Brazilians. Today, the Brazilians dominate Spiritism in the US. The Spanish part of it, the Hispanics are very, very small today, and which I think is something for us Brazilians to pay attention, because very much like the Spanish today are actually decreasing rapidly in size, throughout those decades. The same is going to happen with the Brazilian movement. And actually, this is a good thing, because if we did our work well, if we do our work well, this is what we are going to be seeing each time more. Of course, we are not talking about 5 years, perhaps not even 10, but in the next 20 years, we are going to see Spiritism in Portuguese decreasing and Spiritism in English becoming more important. It doesn't seem much today, but we are growing, and like I told you, if we think about having the 5 books of the codification published in the English language only 14 years ago, and today we have over 100 books, good books, published in English, in Spiritist books. We are growing really fast. And so this is actually, I think, the why we were invited to come to this country and to bring this knowledge to Spiritists that cannot speak Portuguese. Any questions, any doubts?
Yeah, Jussara, just a moment. We have a question here.
So hi, Jussara.
Yeah.
So I have a question about, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So how do you see the Spiritist movement in the schools, especially in the US? Talking about the US. Oh, okay. So I was just listening to one of your programs on Kardec about mediumship, and there was one person that she was talking about her experience in Brazil, how she was presented to different religions when she was in school, when she was little, to the moment that she got to the Spiritist class, and that she was like,
yeah.
oh, this is it, and she was little. And that changed her life and her family's life and all the work she's done since then.
Yes.
So how do you see that change happening?
Yeah, I mean, I hope, we will see that here. not even in Brazil, this is actually that common. The person in question that we are talking about is actually the Vice President of the United States Spiritist Federation, is Tanya. And actually, when she told me that for the first time, I said, "Oh my God, how lucky you are!" I never even knew that there was a possibility. So here we are talking about in the U.S. we are, which I don't know, maybe can be a good thing or not. You know, we are talking about the majority of schools not even allowing any kind of religious movement, just not to avoid, you know, this thing of, you know, comparing religions or having to teach them all. But hopefully in the future, you know, things are going to change, and it has to change, and it has been changing. But like I said before, we have to do our parts without expecting, you know, or questioning whether it's going to happen or not. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen. If we were going to look at the world today or United States today, I would say not so soon. But like I told you, I would never have dreamt that 14 years ago, when we had just 3.5 books in English, we would have more than 100 in such a little amount of time. So I think it's up to us to try to bring this, and maybe, you know, one of the tendencies that we are seeing is that, you know, this thing about skipping a generation, that many children and youngs are the ones that are asking their parents to give something more to them, to bring them to the Spiritist Center. So maybe, hopefully, one day we will have that, but I don't know when.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ricardo, are you listening to us?
Yes.
Okay, we cannot see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Jussara, thank you so much for this effort. We really appreciate that. So I have 2 questions. The first one is, does the U.S. Spiritist Council or Federation have a process to help to validate the books being translated or being published are congruent with Allan Kardec's main books and moral and logic? That's the first question. And the second one, I don't know if I have time for all the answers, but at least I'll put it there and maybe we can get the answer later, is what is the Federation's view, if there is one, or if there is, and maybe yours, with your experience, on Spiritist centers who have, let's say, published letters from mediums to people, like in the past we heard the Chico Xavier did, bringing consolation, and for those who are new to Spiritism, that's kind of like an attractive thing. People to get more interested and like the first step. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Okay. One question is, in terms of the publication of books, we try to do our best to have, to at least indicate to people when asked what books they should read. And of course, we are very careful. All the books that are published through the United Spiritist Federation, we are very careful in when we are choosing the books that we are going to be publishing. We have others publishing here. We have one that is actually related to my group here in the Spiritist group of New York that we call the Spiritist Alliance for Books. And we have the Leal publisher now that is just publishing books from Divaldo. And we have the Edistay of America. All of those, they have been very selective and very careful in publishing books. Of course, there are individual initiatives, and I already know of a few titles that were published by their own authors or somebody else, you know, that would not be books that we would recommend. So in terms of the work of the Federation, we are always on top of that, and I think we still can be considered ourselves lucky, because as opposed as in Brazil, that there is a huge amount of books that actually, if I receive them as a gift, I immediately recycle them. You know, I when I say recycle, you know, it's putting on the garbage of paper. So in Brazil, we have this problem. As to your second question, it's a very important question, actually. You know, Kardec is stress a lot the need for us to work on learning and understanding the main tenets of Spiritism, and in relation to our perennial questions, from where did I come from, what am I doing here, and to where I go. He never talks and emphasizes the need for phenomena. Actually, I even have a workshop that the last slide that I present in this workshop is a phrase by Kardec where he says that in Spiritism, the most important thing is not mediumship or phenomena, but the moral aspects. So when we are talking about any kind of, you know, be it the painting, be it the receiving of messages, we are talking about phenomena. Or when we are talking about just about healing and passes, people will come because, you know, they think that they are going to find a shortcut for their problems. So we have to be very, very careful, okay? We know that the mediumship for people to receive letters from our loved ones that have passed, it does exist. It existed with Francisco Cândido Xavier, but it's not something so easy. You know, it's a very rare form of mediumship. Okay, just recently, I was in Brazil and I was hearing about this medium that was one of them that was receiving those kind of letters that is called, I'm going to say, you know, please be discreet with that. You asked the question, and this is something that is going on there. It's about this medium that is called Fernando Bain. That I know that was even brought, I think, here in the U.S. And now they are finding out that he was faking it, or, you know. One thing that we have to remember, Ricardo, and people do not think about that, is that negative spirits can also see things. So a medium, when receiving a message, you know, from a loved one, doesn't mean that that message necessarily is coming from a highly evolved spirit. It can be coming from a spirit that wants to take our attention off study just to stay in the phenomena, and that is going to be giving us the information. So let's say I go there and my mother's name was Therese, and then the spirit will see, oh, she has a Therese. Let's say, you know, so something about her mom, Therese, and, you know, things like that. So we have to remember that, and we never think about it. So I have to tell you that for myself, I have seen, you know, I understand the need that people have for receiving consoling messages. But I think that, you know, Chico Xavier, he had a mission. he was a missionary. If we think about his career, let's call it career in Spiritism, until the beginning of the 70s was when he brought books that would be the not the complementation, because the Spiritism does not need complementation, but that would stress more all this this understanding that we lacked about the spirit realm. When we think about the works of André Lewis, it's amazing how much we have learned from the spirit realm and the spirits and experiences that we may have there. Then he brought the works that, you know, would expand on Jesus' teachings in the collection of the source of Fonte Viva. We don't have this one translated yet, or do we? Living Spring? No, not Living Spring, I think. Yes. And then we had the books of Emmanuel. So during this period was when he was working more for the basis of Spiritism. When it came to the 70s, where he was already in his 50s, which is an age that people are going to be trusting you more, that had all those experience, had passed through, you know, having to go through the court to respond to process such as the one with the family of Humberto de Campos, all of that. It was when he went to the phase that is called the consoling phase, where he started receiving thousands of letters from the dead. But then we are talking about someone that would write, and would have the signature of the person that had died, that had been attested. We are just going to be publishing next month one book that is this consoling phase of from Chico, that it was from a Jewish young man from a Jewish family, that Chico received it, and the amount of Jewish words that you see in this book is amazing. You know, how could Chico know all of that? The name of the families, you know, those names that you cannot write and memorize at all. So we are talking about a very exceptional case, and it was when Spiritism and Chico Xavier became widely spread in Brazil. So it was a mission. When we had all the solid basis of Spiritism, then it was the time where we had the Pinga Fogo 1, the Pinga Fogo 2, the thousands of letters, and people from all over Brazil receiving and traveling to see. So no one ever could say that this was not a correct letter. So it had a purpose. Now, I don't know if we have this purpose. The phase that we have now is actually to change our inner self, and we can only do that through studying. And so I myself I am very skeptical when, although I know it is possible, but because we are talking about mediumship here, I'm very skeptical when we are talking about, you know, these letters. I mean, so far, the ones that I have seen, I mean, it could be my mom, your mom, anyone else's mom that wrote that with very little amount of personal information, very general, but I understand the need that people may have to look for that. So my advice would be, you know what, focus on what is important and what is going to give support to this person, which is actually what has been giving support to us through all this time. Okay.
Wait. Just to
Yes.
just to compliment. So
are you saying that, I mean, you're not saying it, but my question is how do you say the writing, the psychographic is not important? Because we know there are people that do have that mediumship. So what should we say, or how, what advice should we give to people that do come to us and do have that mediumship?
Let me explain clear. I'm not saying that psychography is not a good thing.
Okay.
According to Kardec, is the best thing, because you will also have in writing everything that happened. What I'm saying here is mediums that work exclusively or most exclusively should receive personal messages from the dead. I am a medium of psychography. And so, and I know how important this is and how many great messages in general, but we are talking about general messages. Chico Xavier used to say, the phone always rings from there to here. We never make a call. They make a call and we answer. So, you know, what is very hard is for us to be sure and to guarantee that if you are here today and you want to receive a message, a letter from your dead father, that I'm going to psychograph that, because it's not possible for us to do that. Maybe your father is not even in the condition of doing that because he is too evolved or not. Because even when you are too evolved, you have to use intermediaries, and he cannot be at our, at our reach when we call. So we are talking particularly in the case of receiving letters by the dead to give to the audience. I think I'm always, I understand, I accept that this is a reality. I know that there are mediums that can do that, but even then, I'm very cautious when we are talking about this particular kind of psychography.
Okay.
So if you have mediums that have psychography, there is no problem that they have psychography. The only advice that we always give it, do not do this at home alone. Always, if you have any kind of mediumship, you will use your mediumship in the Spiritist Center, because it's the only place where you can guarantee that you are not going to be deceived by other spirits, and that you are going to be protected, and the message can be trustful.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Jussara, we want to say thank you so much for being here with us, and we know how late it is for you, so thank you. We really appreciate it.
No problem. I'm really happy, and I hope, we didn't talk about United States Spiritist, no, not United States, the International Spiritist Council, but its basics is the same thing as the United States Spiritist Federation, with the same purposes, just instead of, working on the country, it works with all the countries. So always with a name of union, of exchanging experiences, and of helping increase and spread the movement. I'm very happy that I had you all, and I hope soon I will visit you there. Actually, I'm planning to go to
January.
No, it's February. It's February 24th. So I'll be able to meet you personally and hug each one of you. And thank you for your attention and for, for this opportunity of being with you. Okay.